The immigrant janitor covered a coworker's shift. Clueless, the CEO was his long-lost father in disguise. The fluorescent lights of Horizon Enterprises buzzed overhead as Miguel Reyes methodically pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor, his weathered hands gripping the handle with familiar determination. It was well past midnight, the towering glass building now a hollow shell save for the occasional security guard and the soft whir of computers left running. Miguel had agreed to cover Hector's shift tonight, something about a family emergency. One more 8-hour shift wouldn't kill him. One more opportunity to send money back home to his daughter in Mexico. The reflection staring back at Miguel from the polished elevator doors looked tired. Deep lines etched around his eyes, salt and pepper hair cropped short, shoulders slightly stooped from years of manual labor. At 53, his body reminded him daily of its limitations. Yet he moved with the quiet dignity of a man who had never shirked from hard work. 20 years in America, and sometimes it still felt like his first day. The language no longer tripped him up as badly, but the perpetual feeling of otherness lingered like a shadow. He was invisible to most of the people who worked in this building. Just another uniform keeping their world clean while they climbed corporate ladders and chased dreams he had long ago set aside. Miguel's mind drifted, as it often did during these lonely night shifts, to memories of home. To Veracruz and the small coastal village where he'd grown up. To his late wife, Carmen, whose smile still visited him in dreams. And to his other life, the one he never spoke about, the one that sometimes felt like it had happened to someone else entirely. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Miguel pushed his cart into the top floor, executive territory, where the carpet was thicker, the art more expensive, and the trash bins filled with evidence of catered lunches rather than vending machine snacks. His routine was automatic by now. Empty the bins, vacuum the carpet, wipe down surfaces, clean the bathrooms. It was while emptying the trash in one of the conference rooms that Miguel noticed the man. He sat alone at the far end of the long mahogany table, suit jacket discarded over a chair, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. Papers were spread before him under the pool of a single desk lamp. The man didn't look up, seemingly unaware of Miguel's presence or simply accustomed to ignoring the cleaning staff. Miguel cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me, senor. I need to clean." The man startled slightly, blinking rapidly as if returning from some distant place. "Oh, I'm sorry. Please, go ahead." His voice carried the polished timbre of education and privilege. Yet there was something almost familiar in its cadence that Miguel couldn't place. Up close, Miguel estimated the man to be in his early 60s, with silver hair swept back from a high forehead, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a straight nose, and eyes, tired but sharp, that were a striking shade of gray-blue. "You work late," Miguel commented, immediately regretting the unsolicited observation. It wasn't his place to make conversation with executives. But the man smiled, the expression warming his otherwise severe features. "Sometimes the quiet helps me think." He gestured vaguely at the papers. "Besides, I'm not very good at going home to an empty house." Miguel nodded, understanding that particular loneliness all too well. He moved efficiently around the room, hyper-aware of the man's presence. "You're not the regular cleaner for this floor," the man observed suddenly. Miguel paused, dustcloth in hand. "No, sir. I cover for Hector tonight. Family emergency." "That's kind of you," Miguel shrugged. "Is what coworkers do." He returned to wiping down the credenza, feeling the man's eyes on him. "How long have you worked for Horizon?" the executive asked. 7 years at this building. Before I clean at downtown location for 3 years. A decade of service." The man nodded appreciatively. "That's longer than most of our executives stay." Miguel offered a small smile, unused to this kind of recognition, especially from someone clearly so high up the corporate ladder. Most executives treated the cleaning staff like furniture, present but not worthy of acknowledgement. "Tony, what's your name?" the man asked. "Miguel Reyes, sir." Something flickered across the man's face, so quickly that Miguel almost missed it. A shadow, a recognition, gone before it fully formed. "I'm Edward," the man said after a brief hesitation. "Edward Kingston." Miguel froze. Everyone at Horizon knew that name. Edward Kingston, CEO and founder of Horizon Enterprises, the tech innovator whose face occasionally appeared on business magazines. Miguel had cleaned his actual office on the rare nights when the executive floor rotation fell to him, but he'd never encountered the man himself. "I apologize for disturbing you, Mr. Kingston," Miguel said formally, reverting to the professional distance he maintained with all the building's occupants. "No, please." Kingston waved a hand dismissively. It's refreshing to have a normal conversation. Most people either want something from me or are too intimidated to speak to me like a human being. Miguel nodded, not entirely sure how to respond. He continued his cleaning, aware of Kingston watching him with an interest that seemed disproportionate to the mundane task of emptying trash bins. "Where are you from originally, Miguel?" Kingston asked suddenly. "Mexico. Small village near Veracruz." Kingston's fingers stilled against the table. "Veracruz," he repeated softly. "Beautiful coastline." "You know Mexico?" Miguel asked, surprised. "I spent some time there. Many years ago." Kingston's gaze turned distant, focusing on something beyond the conference room walls. "A lifetime ago, really." The conversation lapsed into silence as Miguel finished cleaning the room. As he prepared to leave, Kingston spoke again. "Thank you, Miguel. Not just for cleaning, but for the conversation." Miguel nodded respectfully. "Good night, Mr. Kingston." As he pushed his cart toward the elevator, Miguel couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled over him during their brief interaction. Something about Kingston's eyes, the way they had studied him with such intensity. Like a man trying to place a half-remembered face. Miguel dismissed the thought. To a man like Edward Kingston, janitors were interchangeable parts of the building's operation, not individuals with stories or connections. Whatever Miguel had sensed was surely just his imagination, a product of midnight loneliness and too many hours under fluorescent lights. Yet as the elevator doors closed, Miguel couldn't help glancing back toward the conference room where the CEO sat alone, a solitary figure illuminated in a pool of light amid the darkness of the empty building. The following night, Miguel arrived for his regular shift to find a note waiting for him in the staff room. His supervisor, a perpetually harried woman named Diane, handed it to him with raised eyebrows. "Came down from the executive floor," she said, her tone suggesting this was highly unusual. "Apparently, Mr. Kingston himself asked for you specifically to clean the executive floor tonight." Miguel stared at the note, a simple request on expensive company letterhead. His stomach tightened with anxiety. Had he done something wrong the previous night? Said something inappropriate? "Is problem?" he asked Diane. She shook her head. "Just unusual. Kingston rarely notices anyone below vice president level." She eyed him curiously. "What did you do up there last night?" "Just clean," Miguel answered honestly. "We talk a little bit. Well, whatever impression you made, it was enough for him to request you again." She gestured toward the service elevator. "Don't keep the boss waiting." The executive floor was quieter than usual when Miguel arrived. Most of the offices were dark, including Kingston's corner suite. For a moment, Miguel wondered if the CEO had gone home already. But then he spotted light spilling from the same conference room as the night before. Kingston sat in nearly the identical position, though tonight his tie was completely removed, and a half-eaten sandwich sat on a plate beside his work. He looked up as Miguel entered, and a smile spread across his face. "Miguel, thank you for coming." "Is my job, Mr. Kingston." "Edward, please." At this hour, with just the two of us, I think we can dispense with formalities. Miguel nodded uncomfortably, unused to such familiarity from an employer, let alone the company's founder. "I hope you don't mind that I requested you," Kingston continued. "I find I work better when there's someone else around, even if we're not speaking. The building gets too quiet sometimes." "Is no problem," Miguel assured him, beginning his cleaning routine. As he worked, Kingston asked casual questions. How long Miguel had been in America, if he had family. Miguel answered politely but briefly, years of caution making him hesitant to share too much of himself. Still, there was something disarming about Kingston's interest that gradually loosened his reserve. "I come to America 20 years ago." Miguel found himself explaining as he wiped down the glass tabletop. "My wife Carmen, she died in childbirth with our daughter Isabella." "I'm very sorry," Kingston said, his voice genuinely sympathetic. Miguel nodded his acknowledgement. "After, I need new start. My cousin in California say America is place of opportunity. So I come, send money back for my daughter, who stay with my sister. That must have been difficult, leaving your child behind." "Most difficult thing," Miguel agreed, the familiar ache of that separation still present after all these years. "But I built better life for her. She finished university last year, first in our family. Now she works as teacher." Pride swelled in Miguel's chest as he spoke of Isabella. The sacrifices, the years of separation, all worth it to give her opportunities he never had. "You did what a father should," Kingston said quietly. "Sacrificed for your child's future." Something in his tone made Miguel look up. Kingston was staring at the papers before him, but his mind seemed far away, a profound sadness etched in the lines around his eyes. "You have children, Mr. Edward?" Miguel asked. Kingston hesitated. A son, at least I did. We've been estranged for many years. I am sorry to hear. It was my fault, Kingston said with sudden rawness. I made choices. I thought I was doing the right thing at the time. He removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. The road to hell, as they say. Miguel recognized the pain in the other man's voice. It was the same pain he carried for the years lost with Isabella, though their circumstances were clearly different. Is never too late, Miguel offered gently. To try again. Kingston replaced his glasses, his smile tinged with regret. Sometimes it is, Miguel. Sometimes the damage can't be undone. The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Two fathers separated from their children, one by necessity, one by choices he now seemed to regret. As Miguel prepared to leave, Kingston called out to him. Would you mind if I requested you again? For the executive floor? Miguel shook his head. It's fine. But why? Kingston seemed to consider his answer carefully. Let's just say I find your company restorative. Coming over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Each night, Miguel would arrive on the executive floor to find Kingston working late in the conference room. As Miguel cleaned, they would talk. Casual conversations that gradually deepened as the nights passed. Kingston spoke of building Horizon from nothing. Of the early days when he worked 18-hour days coding in his garage. Miguel shared stories of his village in Veracruz, of the small fishing boat his father had owned, of teaching himself English by watching American movies with Spanish subtitles. What struck Miguel most was how Kingston listened, with genuine interest, as though Miguel's life of manual labor and simple struggles was as worthy of attention as the lives of the business leaders and politicians the CEO normally associated with. On the 10th night, Kingston asked about the scar that ran along Miguel's forearm. Fishing accident, Miguel explained, running his thumb along the pale ridge of tissue. I was 19. Storm came suddenly. The boat, my father's boat, it capsized. My arm catch on broken wood as wave throw me. You were lucky to survive, Kingston observed. Miguel nodded solemnly. My father did not survive. The sea took him. Kingston's expression shifted, a peculiar intensity coming into his eyes. When was this? What year? 1989. August. Kingston went very still, his face draining of color. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at Miguel with an unreadable expression. Are you okay, Edward? Miguel asked, concerned by the sudden change. Kingston seemed to shake himself from whatever thought had gripped him. Yes, I'm fine. Just reminded of something. He cleared his throat. Tell me more about your daughter. Miguel allowed the subject to change, pulling out his phone to show Kingston photos of Isabella, her university graduation, her first day as a teacher, her recent birthday celebration. She has your smile, Kingston said softly, studying one of the pictures. But her mother's eyes, Miguel added with the bittersweet ache that always accompanied thoughts of Carmen. As Miguel was leaving that night, Kingston asked an unexpected question. Miguel, have you ever heard of the Horizon Foundation Scholarship? Miguel shook his head. It's something we established for employees' children pursuing advanced education. Your daughter, Isabella, if she's considering graduate studies, she should apply. As the daughter of a long-term employee, she'd be given priority consideration? Miguel stared at him, stunned by the suggestion. She dreams of master's degree, but the money. The scholarship covers full tuition, plus a stipend for living expenses. Kingston explained. I'll have the information sent to you tomorrow. Why would you do this? Miguel asked, unable to mask his confusion at this unexpected generosity. Kingston's answer was simple. Because everyone deserves a chance to fulfill their potential. Good night, Miguel. That night, as Miguel rode the bus home to his small apartment in East Los Angeles, he couldn't make sense of what was happening. Why would the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company take such personal interest in a janitor? And why did he feel an inexplicable connection to this man he'd known for less than 2 weeks? The scholarship information arrived the next day, just as Kingston had promised. Miguel helped Isabella apply that weekend, his hands trembling slightly as they completed the forms together over a video call. He didn't tell her about his strange new friendship with Edward Kingston, afraid of raising hopes that might come to nothing. On what would become their 14th night of conversations, Miguel arrived to find Kingston not in the conference room, but standing at the window in his private office, gazing out at the city lights below. A glass of amber liquid was clutched in his hand, and something in his posture suggested he'd been standing there for some time. Mr. Kingston? Miguel called softly from the doorway. Kingston turned, and Miguel was startled to see that his eyes were rimmed with red, as though he'd been fighting tears. Come in, Miguel. His voice was hoarse. "And please, after all these nights, I think you can call me Edward without the world ending." Miguel entered hesitantly, feeling like an intruder in the elegantly appointed office. "Is something wrong?" Kingston, Edward, gestured toward a leather chair. "Sit with me for a moment, would you?" Miguel perched uncomfortably on the edge of the chair, his cleaning cart forgotten in the hallway. Edward sank into the chair opposite him, setting his drink on the desk between them. "Do you believe in fate, Miguel?" The question caught him off guard. "I believe God has plan," he answered carefully. "Sometimes we no understand it." Edward nodded slowly. 30 years ago, I made a decision that I believed was necessary. The right thing for everyone involved." He took a long breath. "I've spent the last 2 decades wondering if I was wrong." Miguel remained silent, sensing that Edward needed to speak more than he needed a response. "I was young, ambitious, barely out of college with big dreams and bigger debts. I spent a summer in Mexico, researching for my master's thesis." His eyes took on a faraway look. "I met a woman there, beautiful, kind, with a laugh that could make flowers grow. We fell in love, the kind of love you only find once in a lifetime." Miguel felt a strange tightening in his chest as Edward continued. "When summer ended, I had to return to finish my degree. We promised to find a way to be together. I was going to go back for her." Edward's voice grew thick with emotion. "Then I got the news that would change everything. A tech company wanted to buy my thesis project, the algorithm I'd developed. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, but it meant staying in the States, building the company from the ground up." Edward picked up his glass, staring into the liquid as if it might contain answers. "I called her, tried to convince her to come to America, but she had family obligations. Her father was ill, and I couldn't walk away from the opportunity. My ambition won." He took a slow sip. "A month later, she wrote to tell me she was pregnant." Miguel's heart began to pound, a cold sensation spreading through his limbs. "I sent money, promised I'd come when I could, but the company consumed me. Months became a year. Then I heard her father had died in a fishing accident during a storm." Edward's eyes locked with Miguel's. "After that, my letters started coming back. Phone calls went unanswered. It was as if she'd disappeared. I hired people to find her, but they returned with news that she'd died in childbirth." Miguel could barely breathe now, the room seeming to tilt around him. "I was told the baby, my son, had been given to her sister to raise." Edward's voice cracked. "I convinced myself he was better off without me, that I would only complicate his life. So I stayed away, but I set up a trust fund in his name, money he probably never received." "The woman," Miguel whispered, his voice barely audible. What was her name?" Edward's eyes filled with tears. Carmen. Carmen Reyes." The world stopped. Miguel gripped the arms of the chair, anchoring himself as 30 years of his life suddenly realigned around this revelation. Memories flashed through his mind. His sister's evasive answers about Carmen's past, the mysterious American checks that had arrived sporadically during his childhood until they abruptly stopped when he was 12. "You are Eduardo," Miguel said, the name his sister had whispered when she thought he couldn't hear. The name Carmen had called out in her final moments, according to the village midwife. Eduardo nodded, tears now flowing freely down his face. "When you mentioned Veracruz, your age, the scar from the fishing accident the year your father died, I began to wonder. Then you showed me pictures of Isabella, and I saw Carmen's eyes looking back at me. Sure, you knew. All these nights, you knew who I was?" Miguel's voice rose with sudden anger. "I suspected. I wasn't certain until a few days ago, when I had a DNA test run." "DNA test? How?" Edward looked embarrassed. "Your coffee cup. From our conversations. I had to know for sure." He pulled a folded paper from his desk drawer and handed it to Miguel with trembling fingers. "I'm your father, Miguel." Miguel stared at the paper. The scientific confirmation of what his heart was already telling him was true. His entire identity, the story he'd told himself about who he was and where he came from, crumbled around him. "Why you no come back?" Miguel demanded, anger and grief creating a storm inside him. "Why you leave us?" "Leave her? It's the question I've asked myself every day for 30 years. Edward answered, his voice hollow with regret. "I have no excuse worthy of what I did. Ambition, fear, selfishness. Take your pick." He leaned forward, his face etched with decades of remorse. "The company consumed me. By the time I realized what I'd sacrificed for success, it was too late. Carmen was gone, and I was told you were being raised by loving family. I convinced myself that disrupting your life would be selfish. So instead, you abandoned me," Miguel said bitterly. Let me grow up believing my father was dead. Edward flinched as if struck. Yes, he admitted, the worst mistake of my life. Miguel stood abruptly, needing to move, to breathe air that wasn't suffocating him with revelations. He paced the length of the luxurious office, this space that represented everything his father had chosen over him and Carmen. All these years, I cleaned floors. I washed toilets. I send every extra dollar to my daughter. And my father, Miguel's voice broke on the word. My father is a billionaire who builds technology empire. Miguel, did you know I was here? Working in your building? Edward shook his head. I had no idea. I lost track of you years ago. After your sister stopped cashing the checks, the investigators couldn't locate you. Mexico's record systems, he stopped himself. That's not an excuse. I should have tried harder. Should have come myself. Miguel stared out the window at the city below, lights twinkling like the stars over Veracruz he still remembered from childhood. The city that had both given him opportunity and taken so much. His youth, his time with his daughter, the life he might have had if the man behind him had made different choices. When you requested me for this floor, Miguel said finally, turning to face Edward. Was it because you knew? No, Edward answered quietly. That first night, I felt a connection I couldn't explain. Something in your manner, your voice. It was only later that I began to put the pieces together. Miguel studied the man before him, the stranger who was his father. The success etched into every line of his expensive suit, the power evident in his very posture. And yet beneath it all, Miguel now saw something else, a profound loneliness that mirrored his own. The scholarship for Isabella, Miguel said suddenly, was that because she is your granddaughter? A small sad smile touched Edward's lips. Yes, though she would have qualified on merit alone. From what you've told me, she's brilliant. Like her grandfather, it seems. The words hung between them, the first acknowledgement of their relationship that wasn't laced with accusation. Edward's eyes filled with hope. Miguel, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. 30 years of absence can't be erased with an explanation or an apology. But if you would allow me the chance to know you, to be part of your life in whatever way you're comfortable with, it would mean everything to me. Miguel felt the weight of this moment, the fork in the road that lay before him. The easy path would be rejection, to walk away from this man who had walked away from him before he was even born, to protect himself from further hurt by closing the door before it had truly opened. But as he looked at Edward Kingston, Eduardo Reyes in another life, Miguel saw not just the powerful CEO, but a man broken by his own choices, reaching out across decades of regret for a second chance he knew he didn't deserve. I need time, Miguel said finally. This is too much to process tonight. Edward nodded, acceptance and understanding in his eyes. Of course, take all the time you need. I've waited 30 years, I can wait longer. Miguel moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. The photos of Isabella, I will send you more. She should know her grandfather. The hope that bloomed on Edward's face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. Thank you, Miguel. As Miguel pushed his cleaning cart toward the elevator, his mind reeled with the impossible truth. He, Miguel Reyes, immigrant janitor who had spent decades scrubbing floors and cleaning toilets, was the son of one of the wealthiest men in the country. The cosmic irony might have made him laugh if it weren't so painfully representative of how life worked. The arbitrary nature of opportunity and privilege, the random cruelty of fate. Yet amid the turmoil of emotions, something else stirred in Miguel's heart. A cautious, fragile hope. Not for wealth or the material changes this revelation might bring, but for the possibility of healing a wound he hadn't even known he carried. The wound of a fatherless child who had grown into a man who fought every day to be the father he himself never had. 3 days passed before Miguel returned to work. He had called in sick, something he had done only twice in his 10 years at Horizon, needing time to process the revelation that had turned his world upside down. During those days, he spoke at length with Isabella, telling her everything. Her initial shock had given way to curiosity, then a tentative excitement about the grandfather she had never known existed. Do you think you can forgive him, Papa? She had asked during their last video call. Miguel had considered the question carefully. I don't know, Mia, but I think perhaps I need to try. When Miguel finally returned to work, he found the executive floor darkened except for the now familiar light in Edward's office. This time, Edward was seated behind his desk, seemingly absorbed in work, though Miguel suspected he might have been waiting. Edward looked up as Miguel appeared in the doorway, relief washing over his features. You came back. I still have job to do, Miguel answered simply. Edward nodded, understanding the boundaries Miguel was establishing. Of course, Miguel began his cleaning routine, hyper-aware of Edward's presence, but determined to maintain some semblance of normalcy while he sorted through his feelings. For nearly an hour, they existed in a silence broken only by the soft sounds of Miguel's work and the occasional click of Edward's computer keyboard. It was Miguel who finally broke the silence. "Isabella wants to meet you," he said, straightening from where he had been vacuuming the carpet. "She has questions. Many questions." Edward's face lit up with tentative joy. "I would be honored to meet her. Whenever she's ready." Miguel nodded, turning back to his work. Another silence stretched between them, this one slightly less strained. "My sister," Miguel said eventually. "She knew who you were. All those years she knew." "Yes," Edward admitted. "She was protecting Carmen's wishes. Carmen was very hurt when I didn't return." Miguel absorbed this information, another piece of the puzzle that was his life clicking into place. "The checks that came when I was a boy, that was you?" Edward nodded. "Until they started being returned. I thought perhaps your family had moved." "My sister," Miguel shook his head sadly. "She was angry. When I was 12, she told me Carmen made her promise never to take your money, that we would survive without your charity." Pain flashed across Edward's face. "I deserved that." "Maybe," Miguel agreed. "But I was just a boy. That money could have changed things for me. I can never give you back those years, Miguel. But if you'll allow it, I would like to help secure your future. And Isabella's." Miguel stiffened. "I don't want your money." "It's not charity," Edward said quickly. "It's what should have been yours all along. Your birthright." The word hung in the air between them. Birthright. What might Miguel's life have been if he had grown up as Miguel Kingston rather than Miguel Reyes? If he had had access to the education, the opportunities, the doors that would have automatically opened for Edward Kingston's acknowledged son? "I build my own life," Miguel said finally. "With my own hands. Maybe not fancy life, but honest life. Life I can be proud of." "And you should be proud," Edward agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "You've accomplished more with nothing than most men would with everything. You raised a daughter to be educated and kind. You've worked without complaint at jobs beneath your abilities. You've shown more character in your choices than I have in mine." The raw honesty in Edward's voice reached something in Miguel, cracking the protective shell he had built around himself. "When Carmen died," Miguel said quietly, "I was very angry at God. Why take her? Why leave me alone? For many years I carry this anger." He looked directly at Edward. "Now I wonder if some of that anger was really for you, the father who wasn't there." Edward didn't flinch from the accusation. "I wouldn't blame you if it was." Miguel resumed his cleaning, methodically wiping down the glass shelves that displayed Edward's numerous business awards and accolades, symbols of the success he had chosen over family. "All this," Miguel said, gesturing at the office, the building, the empire Edward had built. "Was it worth it? The price you pay?" Edward's answer came without hesitation. "No." He stood, moving to stand beside Miguel at the shelves. "None of it. If I could go back, I would choose differently. Every time." The simple admission, spoken with such certainty, loosened something in Miguel's chest, a knot of resentment he hadn't realized he was carrying. "We cannot go back," Miguel said softly. "Only forward." "Is there a way forward for us, Miguel?" Edward asked, the question vulnerable in its directness. As father and son, Miguel considered the man before him, not the powerful CEO, but the aging father seeking redemption for his greatest regret. In Edward's eyes, Miguel saw his own reflection, the same determination, the same capacity for love and sacrifice. And something else, the genetic legacy that connected them beyond choice or circumstance. "I don't know what it means to have a father," Miguel admitted, "or to be a son to someone like you." "I don't know what it means to be a father," Edward countered, "but I would like to learn. If you'll teach me." The simplicity of the request, the humility it required from a man accustomed to being the authority in every room, touched Miguel deeply. "Perhaps," Miguel said carefully, "we can learn together." 6 months later, Miguel stood nervously in the lobby of Horizon Enterprises, feeling out of place despite the expensive suit that now hung on his frame. Around him, employees hurried to and fro, some nodding respectfully as they passed, others eyeing him with curious glances. Everything had changed, yet some things remained stubbornly the same. Though he no longer pushed a cleaning cart through these halls, Miguel still felt the phantom weight of it sometimes, still caught himself noticing scuff marks on the floor or fingerprints on glass doors, the invisible details that had defined his working life for a decade. "Mr. Reyes Kingston? A young assistant approached, tablet in hand. They're ready for you upstairs. The name still felt strange to his ears. The hyphenated identity that acknowledged both his past and the new reality that was still taking shape. Miguel had insisted on keeping Reyes, refusing to erase the name he had built his life around, the name that connected him to Carmen and to his struggles. But he had accepted Kingston as an addition, a bridge to his father and to Isabella's future. The executive floor was transformed from the quiet, darkened space of his nighttime cleaning shifts. Now it bustled with activity, assistants hurrying between offices, the conference room filled with people in business attire, phones ringing, the energy of commerce pulsing through the air. Edward waited for him outside the boardroom, a smile breaking across his face as Miguel approached. The past 6 months had softened the formal businessman Miguel had first encountered. Though still every inch the CEO in his tailored suit, there was a lightness to Edward now, a joy that seemed to have shed years from his appearance. "They're all inside," Edward said, clasping Miguel's shoulder warmly. "Nervous?" "A little," Miguel admitted. "It's strange to be on this side of company." Edward's expression turned serious. "You don't have to do this, you know. The foundation would continue with or without your direct involvement." "I want to," Miguel assured him, "is important work." The Horizon Foundation for Educational Equity had been Miguel's idea, transforming the company's existing scholarship program into something more comprehensive, focused on providing educational opportunities to the children of service workers, immigrants, and low-income families. Edward had embraced the concept enthusiastically, allocating significant resources and appointing Miguel as its director. Besides, Miguel added with a small smile, "Who better to understand needs of these families than man who lived that life?" Edward's eyes crinkled with pride. "Indeed. Shall we?" As they entered the boardroom together, conversation quieted. Around the table sat Horizon's executive team, foundation partners, and, most importantly to Miguel, Isabella, who had flown in from Mexico for the occasion. At 23, she carried herself with a confidence that made Miguel's heart swell, her mother's eyes bright with intelligence and determination. "Gentlemen, ladies," Edward addressed the room, his hand remaining supportively on Miguel's shoulder. "I'd like to formally introduce the new director of the Horizon Foundation for Educational Equity, Miguel Reyes Kingston." As applause filled the room, Miguel felt a surreal sense of completion, as if his life had somehow circled back to where it was always meant to be, yet in a way he could never have imagined. The immigrant janitor who had covered a coworker's shift, clueless that the CEO was his long-lost father in disguise, now stood as an equal in this room of power and privilege. Later, as the meeting concluded and attendees filtered out, Miguel found himself alone with Edward and Isabella. The three of them, grandfather, father, daughter, bound by blood but still learning the contours of their relationship, still discovering what family meant beyond biological connection. "I have something for you," Edward said, retrieving a small box from his desk drawer. "I've been waiting for the right moment." He handed the box to Miguel, who opened it carefully to reveal an old tarnished silver medallion on a chain. Miguel recognized it immediately. Saint Christopher, patron saint of travelers. His breath caught in his throat. "It was your mother's," Edward explained softly. "She gave it to me the day I left Veracruz. Said it would protect me on my journey and bring me back to her someday." His voice wavered. "I should have returned it to her long ago." Miguel lifted the medallion, feeling its weight in his palm, the physical link to both his parents, to the love that had created him, to the journey that had brought him full circle to this moment. "Now it completes its journey," Miguel said, emotion making his accent thicker than usual. "Back to where it belonged." Isabella stepped forward, touching the medallion reverently. "A piece of my grandmother," she whispered. Miguel placed the chain around his neck, the medallion resting against his heart. "For 30 years, I believe I am man with no father," he said, looking between Edward and Isabella. "Now I understand, I always have father. Here," he touched his chest, "in how I work, how I love my daughter, how I face challenges. Even when I not know you," he said to Edward, "I carry you with me." Edward's eyes glistened with tears. "And I carried the emptiness of your absence. The question of what became of my son, the regret of choices I couldn't undo. But now we have second chance," Miguel said, including Isabella in his gaze. "To be family we should have been all along." Through the wide windows of the executive office, the California sun cast long, golden rays across the three of them, illuminating not just their faces, but the invisible threads that connected them, threads that had stretched across decades and borders. Threads that had frayed but never fully broken. Miguel Reyes Kingston, once just Miguel Reyes, immigrant janitor seeking a better life, stood in the warm light with his father and daughter, his past and future united at last. The journey that had begun in heartbreak and separation now continued in healing and connection, a reminder that sometimes the most important bonds are those we must fight the hardest to restore. And sometimes the greatest acts of cleaning aren't done with mops and buckets, but with forgiveness, second chances, and the courage to begin again.